Welcome back to the Weekly Dive. I'm your host, Nate, and this is my show where I talk about things that interest me, usually related to music or other things that are kind of going on. This week, I'm not going into my most recent song, Keep Moving, but if you haven't checked it out, please give it a listen. It's definitely one of my favorite songs, and I'll say that again during this video, but please go check it out. But today I'm going actually into kind of sort of starting a song, how to kind of get an idea moving, and kind of how to approach songwriting with a sort of low pressure, low commitment theory. I call it sort of creating a vibe. A lot of people kind of teach it and use it, especially in the pop world. So I'm excited to share it with you guys today. Without further ado, I'll send it to producer Nate to take it away. Hello there. Well, again, this week I'm going to go into kind of this idea that's outside of my normal sort of weekly dive vibe where I kind of go into the song. This was sort of a project I was working on, and I wanted just to kind of sort of show people this idea of creating a very non-committal type project, or sort of just a vibe is what I was kind of taught. Originally it was called. But essentially you're just trying to get the idea on paper. Excuse me. And what I mean by that is the sort of the start to something, a song starter, something that someone could listen to, be like, oh, I could see where this could go, basically. So here is one of those sounds. So that's the drop I made. And then I took a break after this. This is a little bit of a build. I'll play that in a little bit. But since I'm working on stuff every day, I've sort of created pathways for me to get things done that, even if I'm feeling uninspired or not feeling like I really want to work on something right at that moment, and it's tough to get things done, I have things I know I can do and still feel productive. One thing I like to do to prep for a lot of those times where maybe I don't feel excited to work on things or whatnot is just having extra song starters. So there's kind of even if you kind of have a song starter, I do a lot of pop leaning stuff also, or sort of a track that you send to a songwriter or a singer. It's easier for them to write on more simple things. So by just getting an idea down and creating sort of a basic arrangement of something, it allows people to kind of see how it could expand right on top of it. You can use it on a rainy day. There kind of isn't really too much harm in these ideas. Plus, some days I feel really inspired just to write, and so I can do 3, 4, 5 of these in a day and then reference these later in the week, or as I try to figure out which song I want to put out in a certain week, I kind of go through this process. So with that, I'm going to kind of go into how I start some ideas, especially if I'm not maybe not feeling necessarily 100% inspired. But what I like to do is start with a sound that sounds cool. In this case, I'm using mostly Serum. I use Operator to kind of go into a sub sound, but I can show that later. So the first thing is find sort of a sound you like, and then I end up kind of just creating a melody that feels cool with it. So the whole point of that is just to kind of get something down that feels nice and feels cool. This was actually, I think, the third iteration of that melody. So I spent some time kind of trying to figure out something that felt nice that I wanted to add stuff to. So once it felt cool, I kind of made the decision in my head that I liked it as sort of a drop bass sound. So what I wanted to do was beef it up to give it the qualities that a drop bass would have. And in my opinion, that's definitely giving it a fat sub, which I did with Operator and that. So here's those two alone. Right, it's kind of got a gnarly sound. But what I wanted to add was sort of something kind of in the mid-range, and I ended up landing on this donk sound. I pretty much just cycled some ideas, some different presets, messed around with some sounds on my own too, and then landed on this guy. So here's those together. just this kind of fun, feels like it kind of could have some good energy to it. Um, so I'm also now deciding this is definitely going to be a drop sound. Let me add some drums to see if it can be danceable. You know, the most important thing is if you're making music that's supposed to be dance music and you're not dancing to it, what are you doing? And if you are one, I want to say I think that feels nice, so I do keep going with this sound. I like how they kind of play off of each other, the drums and the bass. But if you're like me and you're kind of got a fast workflow, sometimes I like to throw on top loops, which are mostly just snare or hi-hat loops. I'll play an example here. But what it does is it helps speed up that process. I don't have to write out a whole thing to see if it feels cool. But I'll end up usually going back and kind of changing them around or trying to make it maybe a little bit more unique if I want to, or sometimes I don't. Sometimes they just fit perfectly, and that's always a blessing. So what I end up going into is the thinking more in the drop. I know something needs to kind of more exist in the high end, a little bit more energy. I'm not at this point, I'm not thinking about swooshes or like big effects or big lead ups. You can, if that kind of is where your brain goes, but I'm really just trying to think of, I have the bass, I have the drums. I know I need something kind of to exist in the high range, and that's pretty much the most basic idea. In the business schools, they teach it as like the minimum viable business product is like one of the newer ways they do it, for like the MVP. I'm not always trying to bring business into music. I don't think it needs to be, but I think by keeping an idea as simple as you can early on, it allows you to expand it more. If you start committing to bigger movements and things like that, I feel like it can kind of put a block on you or a block on others if this is something that you end up collaborating on with somebody else. Plus, in my opinion, if you can make something, if you can say something in the most simple way, that's how beautiful it is. Like all Beatles songs, can all be played on piano and a singer every single time, no matter like which song it is, and it's beautiful. That's ultimately my goal, is to make songs like that. But in this case, I want to have a fun dance song, so here we are playing with synths. So here's me. I added some haze, and then, because I thought it was funny because I'm Hey Nate, but then I also added sort of a do 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 do, because it kind of reminded me of some older kind of like big roomy type EDM. So here's that together. So it just made that second half way more exciting. And so I heard this and I was like, cool. Well, sometimes if you're one of those people like me, especially if you're using Fruity Loops, which is what I started in. Well, I started in Reason, then I got good at Fruity, whatever, not the point. But you kind of sometimes get a loop and you don't really know where to go. But I know this is sort of the drop area. So I'm thinking, well, I want to feel this in context. I want to test one more hypothesis to make sure this is a song I actually want to keep working on, or one I may just want to save for later. And either way, there's no commitment. I could collaborate on something with this, kind of like I was saying before, or share it in any way. There's also the theory of the first pancake, which is basically where sometimes the first one you put on the griddle or whatever doesn't come out well, and then you learn and you adapt to that. So sometimes your first project of the day doesn't work out well. Doing something where you're only getting this far also isn't that big of a commitment. So it's like, well, this didn't work, but hey, whatever, let me go to the next one. Anyway, so I know this is the build, so I'm thinking, well, I want to add more context to it. If I know it's going to be a club song, I need to make sure it has a cool build, that's something that's nice and kind of flows in, and it can hit and feel exciting. And so I made a little bit of a sample build at the end of the drop and kind of extended it just to see how it felt. And so here's that. And so when you're listening to this, what I was thinking was, does this feel cool? Is this something I would want to listen to or maybe expand? Or do I want to save it, maybe start something new? So to me, that feels pretty cool. But what I like to do in order to give myself the space I know my brain needs, sort of like forcing myself to take a break, I'll end up saving this right about here. Um, I obviously recommend saving sooner if you can. Sometimes it takes my brain out of it, so sometimes I try to wait to save. Um, but that's just me. But knowing sometimes your time limits or when you're going to start to have diminishing returns is a good thing. Usually when I get to this stage, I know the idea is there, right? In my mind, if the idea is a good idea now, it'll also be a good idea in 20 minutes or the next day. So I don't really feel a whole lot of pressure that I have to keep going once I get past the basic idea. And again, we're trying for the most simple thing that anybody could understand listening to it, kind of what the idea of what you're trying to do is. The reason I say anybody is just because, you know, I personally want my music to be listenable to as many people as possible, or at least understandable. If you're trying to make some more complex music or trying to do that, which I know I do too, that's cool. That's awesome. Knowing just what you're looking for is the most important thing, or what you're trying to create here. So I hope this is helpful. I do, again, want to share these project files and stuff like that. I'm trying to find a place to kind of host them. I was thinking Dropbox or something like that. But shoot me a message if you just want this one. And if you haven't checked out my song Keep Moving that I put out this week, it is definitely my favorite song I've ever put out in my life. So please go check it out. It really is exciting to me. So with that, I will send it back to Broadcast Nate to take it away. Well, thank you, producer Nate. This has been a fun episode for me. I really liked kind of going into this. It was definitely a lesson that when I learned it from some other people, was really helpful, and so I was really excited to share it. Again, please go check out my song Keep Moving and some of the other stuff if you haven't yet. Keep Moving is definitely like I said, one of my favorites, and one of the things that I really feel like said the things that I've been wanting to say. So go stream that or listen to it. If you want the project file, hit me up. I'm happy to share it, but I hope this is something that you can use and maybe learn in one of your projects as well. Stay safe and try to just enjoy your life doing things that you can do with other, on your own or with other people, and there's stuff that you can do when you're outside. So peace.